Tonight we're going to talk about the Tsavo man-eaters, one of the deadliest animal attacks in human history that claimed the lives of over 100 railroad workers in Kenya, Africa. Now this is called the Tsavo man-eater story. It happened because the Tsavo Railroad was getting built by Lieutenant Colonel John Patterson. This happened over a 9-month period. Okay, buckle up. Tonight's going to be a long video. Some people have been asking me to do long form, almost a podcast style video. Go ahead, get comfy. Some of y'all want to fall asleep to this. Go ahead. Happy nightmares. So to begin this story, we have to understand what was happening, okay? This railroad was being constructed, and it was going to be a major change in the landscape in the Tsavo area. Now, tons of people in Kenya did not want this railroad because it was going to interrupt so much of their daily life. It was going to go against so much of their traditions and values. So when the Tsavo man-eater attack started happening, many of the people celebrated it, thinking it was actually spirit guardians protecting the land, okay? In actuality, what it was two genetically different lions that to this day science does not have a great explanation for, that were hunting, stalking, and killing the railroad workers that were going across this Senya Basin. Now, these lions were not just regular lions. That is a big misconception, okay? It was 2 male lions that got named Ghost and Darkness by Lieutenant Colonel Patterson. He hunted them for months and studied them. After they were seen, it would even fueled the fire because they weren't regular lions. They were white almost, and they were maneless. So at first they thought they were huge female lionesses. They weren't. They were 2 big alpha male lions, and unlike regular lions, they were working together in a team by themselves without a pride. They were just completely rogue. They didn't have cubs. They didn't have females to go back to. And unlike most lions, the female lions are the hunters, right? These male lions are breaking all the rules, going against every code in the book that any biologist knows of lion behavior. Now that we know what we're dealing with, imagine yourself as one of the Kenya railroad workers. They would lie in their cots at night, knowing that death was coming yet again. Because tonight, like every other night for the past 9 months, they would just wait to see which one of them was getting picked off. Because these lions, even though they were being offered food, they would literally go and hunt, antelope and different prey and leave it out for them. The lions had no interest in it. They only wanted one thing, and that was human meat. It's one of the few documented cases ever where an animal would skip over convenience and its normal food to go find a human. And when I say find them, they tried everything. They put up barricades, fences. They lit big fires. These lions were not afraid of fire. They were not afraid of loud noises. They weren't afraid of anything. And every night, like clockwork, one person would get taken. These lions earned their nickname Ghost in Darkness because they would appear out of nowhere and then vanish without a trace. It was insane how efficient they were. So those Kenya workers, they would just be laying there waiting, just wondering if tonight was going to be their turn. They would try to stay awake through the night. They would take shifts. They would take turns. But somehow the lions always found the blind spot of these hundreds and hundreds of workers. They would find the blind spot, the one weak link, the person that got left alone just for a second. They never failed to get their target. It was insane. Some of the people there even reported being targeted as seeing the lions almost get them. They avoid capture, but then the lions would come back for that same person, bypassing others, because once they got their scent, they wanted that target. Now, imagine how big a lion is. These lions were over a third of the normal size of a typical male lion. You're talking about a lion that weighs about 1,000 pounds. So as a Kenyan railroad worker, you're just slaving away all day, just working so hard, just sweating, it's hot, and you're just thinking, all you can think about is how I didn't sleep the night before because I thought they were going to get me, and now I've got to go to bed again, wondering if they're going to get me, wondering if I'm going to get to see my family again, get out of this hellhole ever again, because these guys were under contract, okay? Not only that, a lot of these workers were incredibly poor. This was their only chance to earn a good wage in this area. And not only that, you are thinking that this thing is not just a lion that you can protect yourself against. Everybody in camp is talking about how they're demons, they're spirit guardians. They're coming to destroy us because we're defiling the land. We're going against the laws of nature. They're trying to just take us out. And it only fueled the fire when these people would see these lions, and they're white as a ghost. They're huge. They're incredibly smart. Everybody who saw their faces said that their eyes looked like human eyes, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But their brains were altered. There was advanced development in their brains that is still yet to be explained. Morale at the camp could not have been lower because even if it wasn't you, obviously you're just hearing your friends, your family, your coworkers, just get shredded apart and drug off into the darkness. And not only that, there's packs of hyenas just everywhere, just picking off what is left of these people. So danger is all around at nighttime. I mean, you are quite literally in a hell on earth. Lieutenant Colonel John Patterson knew that this was going to halt the railroad. He didn't expect this. He expected, trouble from the locals. He expected war and conflict and, fights over who owns the land and everything. He did not expect that 2 lions had now taken out a third of his workforce and weren't stopping anytime soon. So he set out to hunt them with some of the most professional trappers in the area. And these things eluded everything. They set out traps and bait and decoys and all this stuff. And these lions, Ghost and Darkness, just somehow always avoided it. They always knew where not to be, where to be. They were climbing fences that didn't make sense for them to be able to get over. They were moving with supernatural speed. After 9 months, he was able to zero in on where they were hiding at. And he did successfully take out both lions. Their bodies were studied, okay? And when they studied their body, they realized that their teeth were not the same as other lions. Their teeth were actually fractured and damaged. And this is what they started to think, maybe that's why they're going after humans, is because their tissue is so much softer and, it's not as muscly as like a zebra's or anything. So maybe that's why they were going after humans. Then they opened up their brain and it showed advanced developments, 2 to 3 times larger than a regular lion's brain. They thought maybe these creatures are, a product of their environment. Maybe they were introduced to something, kind of like how modern day raccoons learn to use doorknobs. They learn to use door handles. They learn to open trash cans. Maybe something in their environment evolved them to think more creatively and more intelligently. Other biologists thought maybe this is some last remnant of a prehistoric breed of lions that is still the alpha on the continent. But that doesn't explain it, because why would they be almost extinct? Because if they're this good against modern technology, I mean, we had weapons, it wasn't like we had spears and bows and arrows. We had modern day traps and weapons, and it was 9 months to catch 2 of them. Okay. So that doesn't explain it. Other biologists stepped in and thought maybe this is somehow a genetic leap. Like maybe somehow lions have evolved, like, animals and creatures have done years after years after years. Maybe they just did a quick leap in, genetic altercation. And they're almost like the missing link to what lions were about to be. And by us taking out those 2 lions, we prevented that genetic leap. Because if they were allowed to breed, I imagine that their children would have been taught the same habits, which was the next big concern. They went on a huge hunt and essentially took out any lion that looked to be white. That is why white lions today are even more rare than they used to be, is because there was a huge hunt on white lions. Now, let's go back a little bit. These lions did not have a mane. Why they don't have a mane is still just completely unknown. We don't know why. That's why scientists do truly believe they might have been some unique, really niche species that somehow was surviving out there on their own, and maybe they weren't even able to breed with the other lions. Who knows? It is still a mystery. Because of the technology we had at the time, we're talking about 1898. Maybe because of the technology we didn't have at the time, we couldn't figure out what we could have found out if those lions would have been discovered today. But that just makes me wonder, and it just opens up my brain when you hear about these old legends of werewolves and vampires and all this stuff. What if those are just animals that were genetically way smarter and stronger, like these lions? I mean, you could argue that these lions were like were-lions instead of werewolves. These things were incredibly smart, outsmarting people left and right. It took one of the most seasoned people in the British military 9 months to hunt only 2 of them, okay? There was a lot of rumors that there was a female lion with this group, but to this day, it's never been confirmed. And there are still rumors and myths in that area that every once in a while, you will see a ghost in the darkness, and that is the female lioness that they never caught. Now, you can read his famous book. It's called Ghost in the Darkness, or you can watch the movie called When Darkness Falls. That movie and that book are the true events of what happened. That movie is very, very accurate to the true events of how it happened. So if you want to watch it, I'm sure you can find it on like Fandango or one of those streaming websites. But the book is a wonderful book. When Darkness Falls is the movie. A Ghost in the Darkness is the book. I hope you enjoyed me recalling the story of the Tsavo Maneaters, a very true, heartbreaking story that was the reality for a whole country. I mean, I can't imagine how many families this affected, how many lineages this ended or altered. I mean, over 100 people to 2 lions is a completely insane number, but it's the facts, and it's what we have to deal with, and it's what we know can happen when man messes with nature in an unnatural way. I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. Definitely follow the page here. We would love to see you around next time. If you enjoyed these long form videos, let me know. We'll do more of them going down the line. Are werewolves myths or the actual terrifying creatures that people have experienced? While we may never know the true answer, here's some horrifying incidences that inspired what we know today as the modern wolfman or werewolf. Now, when we think werewolf, we probably think the origins of the werewolf come from, Germany, somewhere in England, that Middle Ages, Dark Ages type myths and lore. And while the modern werewolf twist did come around then, werewolf stories go back thousands of years. Actually, the first documented story of a werewolf was almost 4,000 years ago in 2100 BC, and it was in a famous story called the Epic of Gilgamesh. Now, there is not just one werewolf story. There is tons and tons. I mean, the ancient Egyptians talked about werewolves. They talk about it in Mesopotamia. The Greeks had, werewolf stories. But here are some more recent ones that actually got documented as true incidents that happened involving wolves. Not saying werewolves, but France and Germany had it real bad when it came to massive, brutal wolf attacks. Before we get into that, the last little thing we're going to talk about is where that name werewolf or lycan comes from. So back in ancient Greek mythology, there was a king Lycaon, and Lycaon was later translated to Lycan, which is where you'll hear that stuff if you watch the movies Underworld. They talk about vampires versus lycans, and it was because Zeus supposedly found a king who preferred eating human flesh, and he said, if you want to behave like a beast, we'll turn you into a beast, and he became a half wolf, half man hybrid. So the most infamous story of a werewolf, wolf-type creature attacking humans was in the late 1700s. It was called the Beast of Govindo. If you guys watch Mr. Ballin, you probably have seen he did a story of one individual, one survivor of that story. Now, the myth and legend is that it was a werewolf. The stone cold fact is in a 3-year time span, more than 100 people, mainly women and children, were killed by wolves. Some of them were in broad daylight. I mean, there was one woman who got a baby snatched from her arms from a pack of wolves. Now, here's where the myth comes in. Tons and tons of survivors of these wolf attacks, because even though over 100 people died, hundreds more were severely injured or missing arms and limbs from these massive, severe wolf attacks. No one really knows why these wolves really attacked the village out of nowhere and started repeatedly attacking them. A lot of people think that maybe the village was growing too big and they took a lot of the natural prey out of the area. But, I mean, they were raising tons of sheep, so why didn't they go after the sheep? Who knows? Now, this was in, the countryside of France. Maybe the wolves just figured out that, hey, people are a lot slower than our normal prey, the deer. But either way, tons of people in the village started saying that they were seeing a humongous wolf that would often walk upright and had a distorted face, and he was the one giving the commands, like he was some kind of alpha leader wolf giving them commands. The story Mr. Ballin tells talks about a boy who came face to face with it and lived to tell the tale and told all the villagers, and he wasn't the only one that reported seeing this massive wolf creature that seemed to have heightened intelligence and seemed to be bipedal. Now, like I said, that's the myth. The truth of it is still in French documentation that more than 100 people in a 3-year time span were killed by wolf attack. That's a stone cold fact. Now, this story actually reached the king, who sent down professional hunters and trappers to kind of eradicate the wolves. And this is where modern day wolves get a horrible rap. You probably see this over in Colorado and everything right now, of people just killing wolves left and right, which is completely unnecessary, by the way. They're a natural part of the ecosystem. If you can't defend your cattle good enough, sorry for you. That's on you, it sounds like. Cattle aren't even from here originally. There was no cows in the United States originally at all. They came from the UK and different parts of the world. Cattle is not a natural occurring animal in North America. Fun fact for you. So now this, like I said, this onslaught went on for 3 years. Some people would get their babies ripped from their arms, like this one woman. The wolves are getting clever enough to come through the windows, because a lot of people didn't have, glass windows. Obviously, that's a newer technology. They would figure out how to get the latch open on the window, and they would actually crawl into the house, and people would wake up with 3 and 4 wolves in their house, literally grabbing them or their children. Some of the stories you can read online that are actually documented, written down still in French history of these wolves are incredible. It makes me think of the lion story we talked about the other night, about how they had heightened intelligence and seemed to have a understanding on how people worked, because they would tend to watch these women and children until they were alone, and then immediately they would go and attack them when they were left undefended. Didn't matter if it was day or night, which we know natural wolves are obviously mainly nocturnal. An older one, but it is still documented in French history, was in the late 1430s, all the way to the 1450s. And it was because they were having, year after year, they were having these really severe winters. And the wolves, most of their prey was hibernating or just going away, and it was becoming more and more scarce as people were having to hunt more often to stay warm, use the furs, use the meat to eat. They weren't being able to grow as many crops, so they had to eat more wild prey. So the wolves started going after people. And one wolf in particular, this is almost like Moby Dick. This one wolf was a big wolf, it was a big female wolf, and it actually gained notoriety. And they gave her an individual name, and she alone was documented killing more than 40 people. We're talking about one wolf responsible for more than 40 deaths. They named her Courtade, which actually translates to short tail, because whether she was fighting with another wolf or with a hunter, somehow she lost the majority of her tail, so she had a bobbed tail, and they called her Courtade. Now, to me, that is just terrifying to know that there's a physical wolf that you can see. That might as well be a werewolf that is bigger and smarter and stronger, and it has learned to go after people, nothing else. They're just going straight for people. This wolf apparently lived on people almost. And, over 40 by itself. This wolf was around a long time. People reported seeing it for almost 20 years in this area. It was like 17 to 18 years she was repeatedly seen. And she was obviously the alpha of the pack besides the big male that was with her that also had a special nickname. Look it up if you want to. But he was kind of more hanging back and just kind of watching the show. Super neat, crazy. I mean, that's Paris. Could you imagine something like that happening in modern day Paris? People would see her all the time. During the day and early morning is when she was most often seen. But early morning, people would actually not go out by themselves because it was almost a guarantee that her or her pack would get you if you were alone. Hundreds and hundreds of people were killed by this one pack of wolves. Now, to me, the next one is the scariest one. It's the children eating wolves of Turku. This was in the late 1800s, like 1880. In about an 8-month time span, more than 20 children were killed. And apparently there was no reports of deaths of adults. There was injuries to adults, but these wolves had learned to go after specifically children. The younger, the better. And what makes this really, really scary is the pack of wolves was led by a pet wolf that had escaped from its owner or chose to leave its owner, whatever. It was a big female wolf that was raised by people. Because of this, she did not fear people, so she would just run up to them, and the pack of wolves that would normally be scared to approach people would just follow with her and get that mob mentality. And more, like I said, more than 22 kids in an 8-month time span. If you average that out, I mean, that's a couple kids, a little bit more than 2 or 3 kids a month getting killed by this one pack of wolves. And that's just the reported deaths that they know of. Once again, this is all documented as well. This isn't like a myth or like some boogeyman stories to keep the kids from going out and playing in the woods. This was actually an investigated situation where the government did have to get involved. Once again, we talk about people should not own exotic animals. I know this was in the 1800s. It was a different time. I'm sure somebody probably owned this for protection, but we see that in modern day stuff too. When you have an escaped zoo animal or escaped, private pet, you might have heard about it here in Oklahoma. There was a monkey that escaped and bit the neighbor's ear off. You have those kind of situations. We do not advocate that anybody should own exotic animals of any kind. The last one we'll talk about today is the most recent one, and it's the wolf attacks of Kurov. This was post-World War II Russia, so you got to think a lot of the men were dead and gone, and these wolves were targeting women and children that were living in this rural part of Russia called Kurov, and they were going after them because they were essentially defenseless, and there was a lack of firearms at the time because most of the firearms that people individually owned had been given to the government for World War II. So a lot of these houses no longer had firearms, and it was way past the time of bows and arrows. More than 20 people were killed in about a year time span from a single pack of wolves that was on the outskirts of the village. Once again, just like the rest of these stories, government had to get involved and eradicate this wolf pack that was actually pretty large. This wolf pack had more than 20 wolves in it, which is a pretty large pack. Your typical wolf pack consists of about anywhere between 8 and 15 members. We hope you like this series that we've been doing here lately. It's kind of like right in the middle of like kind of creepy stuff and true crime stuff. We're talking about real incidences and real things that have happened, but this time we're doing the ones that involve animals, like we did the lion attacks, the Tsavo man-eaters the other day. We're doing this one tonight. Follow the page. We're going to do some of the biggest animal attacks in human history, which 2 of them happened in the same war, which was World War II. We'll get into that video next, so follow along. Make sure you have that update on there clicked. We're going to talk about the USS Indianapolis, which was the biggest shark attack on record. And then we're going to talk about there was an island in Japan where more than 1,000 people were killed by crocodiles in a single night. So we're going to talk about those coming up soon. This tiger actually launched a criminal investigation because they could not believe what this tiger actually did. Okay, this is a real story that happened back in 1997 over in East Russia in Siberia. Okay, there was a Russian poacher who illegally went into the forest. So starting off, I'm already saying whatever happened to him, he deserved it. On this illegal hunting venture that he was on, he actually came across a big male tiger. And he actually took a shot at it, and he did hit the tiger, but he only wounded it. Now this tiger, it had a vendetta. It was not going to forget this, okay? So this is the mistake the hunter made. He started actually following the tracks, okay? And he was following the blood trail. Then Vladimir, the hunter that was on this expedition, realized that he was following the footprints and the blood trail in a circle. And the tiger had actually led him back and was waiting on him. When he realized this, him and his dog ran, and he actually found a hunting cabin that belonged to one of his friends, okay? Now, this tiger is silently stalking him because it's still injured, mind you. He makes it to the friend's cabin, and the friend actually tells him to leave, get out of here. I don't want no part of this. This tiger could literally rip the door off of this thing, and apparently, I did not know this, they are known to never forgive and never forget. So I've always heard that with elephants, did not know tigers were in the same classification. It was coming for him, okay? He actually went back out, and on his way to try to get back to his home, the tiger did catch up with him, and it dismembered him. Okay? This is where police get involved, because it took a wild turn. No one knew where he was, and they were like, okay, we got to find this man. You know, his family has reported him missing, and his cabin had been broken into and tore to shreds. I mean, completely obliterated this cabin. Like, I mean, it looked like somebody had broke into it and just ransacked it, but no one did. It was the tiger. The tiger actually, after it dismembered him, it used his scent to find his home and then destroyed his home. Unfortunately, this is where it actually did take the life of his dog as well. I know, poor puppy did not deserve that. Next is where it almost takes a turn to the supernatural. Okay, this thing gained like super intelligence somehow. It started stalking and hunting the party that was actually trying to find Markov, the missing hunter. Okay, it was actually laying in wait on well-trafficked trails. It knew people use these human trails, and it was stalking and waiting. They were eventually able to hunt down and shoot this tiger, and that's how they put together this whole story to know that he'd shot it and everything else. It had a gunshot wound on it that matched his rifle, so they know that he was the one that gave it that wound. They followed the tracks, the blood. They talked to the other person that was in the cabin that told him this story about how this tiger is stalking and hunting him. Like, they pieced it all together like a real criminal investigation because they couldn't believe that a tiger had actually done this. They actually investigated the friend that he went to thinking that maybe he had done it and then left the body out for animals to maul and attack later. But when they found the tiger and found the rifle wound that matched, they knew that this is exactly what happened. And all those claw marks that actually were in the cabin matched this tiger perfectly. So this goes down in history as one of the only animal attacks that was premeditated and use retaliation. The animal got away from the danger, but then decided to go back and used a thought out plan to eliminate the hunter and anybody else who might come after it afterwards. The two scariest grizzly bears that I can think of in recent history. The first one happened in Montana in 2016. This guy named Todd Orr was out bow hunting for elk. And I'm going to say these attacks were unprovoked, but anytime you're in nature, you're in its domain. So that would alone count as provokedness. Anyhow, he crossed the paths of a grizzly mama with her babies, and you know how that's going to go. This bear chased him down and literally just mauled him. He pretended to be dead. The grizzly bear left him, okay? He gets up after the bear's gone, and he has to walk 3 miles back to his vehicle with his skull literally exposed. Puncture holes all in him. This was a massive, over 1,000-pound grizzly bear. He has, his forearm is almost completely ripped off. And as he's walking that 3 miles back to his truck, guess what he hears? The bear coming at him again. He's made it halfway to the truck, and this bear has followed him for 1.5 miles and tears him up again. Somehow, unknown how, he lives. The bear leaves him again. He takes out his phone, and he actually makes a kind of a funny video for his wife and his kids, because he assumes he is going to bleed to death before he makes it to the truck. He has no cell service, so he just records this video of him walking to the truck, and he's like, life sucks in bear country is what he famously said in this video. And then he said, I love you all. I'll miss you all if I don't make this. I just wanted there to be some record of what happened to me. And then he's walking back to the truck, and somehow he makes it to the truck,
and then drives himself to the hospital, where his skull is literally like in the open air. Like, you can just look on the side of his head and see his skull. Like, I mean, it tore him to pieces, but somehow didn't really break any bones or anything. Just gave him a bunch of puncture and claw wounds. Miraculously, he lives, okay? This next one, the reason why it is so scary is because these dudes literally had just stepped out of their truck. They weren't on a hike. These two guys were up in Alaska. The first guy who lived, his name was Daryl Koontz. But his friend Mark Smeltz was not so lucky. So what happened is these guys were surveyors. They were in a company truck. They pulled up in this area. It wasn't even that remote. Like, it wasn't like that extreme. Like, it was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, like by most people's standards. But for Alaska standards, it was like they just pulled over. They got out of their truck, literally had taken like 20 or 30 steps away from the truck, and out of nowhere, a grizzly bear charges out of the wood. It grabs Mark Smeltz, and it kills him right then and there. Now, Daryl cannot make it to the truck. The bear is between him and the truck. He climbs a tree. This bear, this is morbid, this bear eats his friend underneath the tree for the next like 6 hours. Daryl Koontz is just in this tree. I mean, I cannot imagine the horror you would have just hearing your friend get eaten at the bottom of the tree. The friend's dead, and he's just getting eaten. And he's thinking, like, after this bear's done eating my friend, it's probably just going to climb this tree like it's nothing, because bears can climb trees like nothing, and eat me too, right? So he's there for like 6 hours. Finally, some rescuers do come out, because like they were only supposed to be gone for like 30 minutes to an hour. No one's answering their phones. Their phones are in the truck. No one's answering their phone. So they come out and look for him. And immediately when they pull up, they see the bear. It's eating Mark still, and Daryl's in the tree. The bear gets scared, runs away. They do recover Mark's body. Daryl comes out of the tree, and he is just terrified. I mean, absolutely mortified. Like, you can watch the video. There's a documentary called I Survived, and he's in the documentary, and he talks about how he will never forget the sound of hearing his friend's bones just being crunched and ate on while he's sitting in this tree. I could not think, there is literally not a horror story that you could tell that is scarier than that. I mean, that's a literal 1,500-pound monster sitting underneath the tree, just eating its dinner, just waiting to get done with that to come get you next. I mean, I would have had a heart attack. I'd have died. Saltwater crocodiles single-handedly won a major battle in World War II, and that battle was the island of Ramree Island. This is an island just south of Burma on the southeast part of Asia. Now, if you haven't heard this story, it is in the Guinness World Book of Records for the most deaths due to animal attack in a period of time. This was, one of the wildest incidents you could ever imagine. So essentially what happened is this island is a perfect mangrove habitat that's been undisturbed. No one lives on Ramree Island, okay? It is one of the biggest islands off of the south coast of Burma. And it made the ideal breeding and hunting ground for a saltwater crocodile. Now, if you guys don't know how big saltwater crocodiles can get, they can get up to 23 feet long and weigh up to 1 ton. They are absolutely massive. And not only that as far as crocodiles goes, they are often known to have the nastiest behavior. There's only 2 types of crocodiles that are observed regularly hunting humans, and saltwater crocodiles are one of those 2. They are fierce defenders of their territory. So during World War II, the Japanese, they actually dropped off about 1,000 Japanese soldiers on Ramree Island and said, hey, hold this down, defend it. And then they got left there. They had no way to get off the island. And for the first day, it was great. This is like a tropical paradise island. They're posted up, waiting on the British soldiers to come through. The British soldiers get there. They're on their boat watching the island. They said, hey, the next morning we're going to move in and we're going to attack. They never had to, okay? That night, British soldiers documented that it was the most hellish night they've ever heard, and they were just hearing it. They could hear the screams of the Japanese soldiers, and they're off the shore. They're in a boat. Japanese soldiers are on the island. They could hear them from the boat screaming out in agony. Just they could literally say they could hear the snapping of the alligator's jaw or the crocodile's jaws. If you've never heard crocodile's jaws snap before, it is extremely loud. They can snap their jaws well strong enough to snap any bone in your body. They said that you could just hear snaps over and over again. You could hear screams, because what happened at nighttime, crocodiles are mainly nocturnal creatures. During the day, everything was chill. At nighttime, when those crocodiles woke up and started going on that island, it was just a free-for-all. 1,000 Japanese soldiers were left on that island, and over the course of only a few days, only 20 Japanese soldiers actually survived. There was, firefights that lasted all night, but not with British soldiers. It was against the other crocodiles. Okay? This goes down in history as the most brutal series of animal attacks ever. Now, what's wild is in World War II actually also holds the other record for animal attacks. And we'll get into that in a different video. But it's the most shark attacks on record. And that was with the USS Indianapolis. They make a mention of it in the famous movie Jaws. Both of these events happened only about a year apart. And I don't even think it was that much. But these crocodiles, that was their perfect breeding ground. It was like the perfect storm. To this day, Ramree Island is off limits. No one lives there, and that's why. It is just insane how many saltwater crocodiles can live there, and they are fierce territory defenders. They weren't eating 980 people. They were attacking 980 people because they had their space invaded. And, at the end of the day, I don't blame them. That's their home. It wasn't anybody else's home. It was theirs for literal millennia. Crocodiles are one of the oldest creatures on this earth. They are a literal modern-day dinosaur. Now, this attack had such a lasting effect on one of the Allied commanders, one of the British commanders, that after this was over, he worked with the Frogman units, which was kind of like our Navy SEALs. After World War II was over, he became a wildlife biologist and moved to that area and studied that part of the world because this attack just stayed with him. He wanted to research it. He wanted to see what happened. He wanted to study what happened. Now, there's a lot of reports saying that, that many soldiers actually didn't get killed by crocodiles. Some of them might have starved. Some of them might have not understood that there was no fresh water on this island. Some of them might have gotten bitten by snakes. Disease was rampant in that part of the world, especially with mosquitoes. So who knows? But what is not up for debate is that many soldiers were taken out by crocodiles. It was an insane amount, okay? He wrote a book about it. I think the book came out in the 1960s. And it talked about what they heard, what they saw. When they did approach the island, they were like, okay, we are not getting off the boat because we can already see. There were just bodies everywhere. It is one of those things that was so strange and so obscured. With modern day technology, I don't feel like we would have major accidents like this happen. But back then, they just got dropped off and they weren't going to get picked up until later. You couldn't call anybody. In fact, if you didn't know it, after World War II was over, many Japanese soldiers didn't even know the war was over. There were some Japanese soldiers that stayed at their outposts on these islands for years and years and years after the war was over because they had no clue it was over. No one told them. No one could call them up on their cell phone. So these guys couldn't call back and say, hey, turn the boat around. Come get me. Okay, if you guys didn't know it, this is a personal detail about my life. My great uncle was actually killed by a Japanese soldier who did not know the war was over. This is a wild story. I'm not making a joke. This is the truth. It's unknown if he was killed by a rock or a coconut, but essentially he was cleaning up military supplies, they were just packing stuff up. A Japanese soldier was hiding in a tree, not knowing that the war was over, and he jumped down from the tree and bashed my great uncle's head in with either a rock or a coconut. So yeah, imagine my family. We were told the war was over. He was coming home. Weeks later, he died because the war was over and they were just doing cleanup. Now, obviously, this was decades and decades and decades before I was born, but that story has always stayed with my family.